With affordable housing being an issue in the United States, more people are considering tiny houses on wheels as a living option. While tiny houses are a potential low-cost living solution, there is a certain price threshold where it no longer makes sense to buy one. I'm Craig. I live in a self-built tiny house here in Washington State. Obviously, I'm a fan of tiny houses, but I think there are some misconceptions about them being a good financial investment. In this particular video, when I reference tiny houses, I'm referring to a tiny house on wheels. Tiny houses on a foundation are a whole different topic, and many of the things I bring up today won't apply to them. In my experience with the tiny house community, the majority of people looking into tiny houses want them for their lower price point. They like the idea of not having a mortgage and the financial freedom that comes with lower monthly housing costs. People browse tiny houses on YouTube and Pinterest and fall in love with the elegant layouts and well thought out designs. I know, I was one of them. But then they see the price tag. What? How much? And they're right to think that, because tiny houses at a high price point are not a good financial investment. Here's why. Tiny houses don't hold their value very well. First, they aren't attached to any land, so they lose out on that opportunity for value appreciation by being located in a sought-after neighborhood or in a school district that draws people into the area. The second issue is that most tiny houses are built to fit the original owner's lifestyle. These customizations can be very expensive, and they're likely worth it for that original person or couple. But when the original owner goes to sell that property, those customizations now limit their potential buyer pool to other people who desire those exact same features. Unlike big homes, tiny houses don't have room for a lot of renovations. You can only do so much with a small space. I check the sale posts of tiny houses fairly regularly, and I have never seen a tiny house sell for more than it was purchased for. The only time this comes remotely close to happening is when it was a self-built home and labor wasn't really calculated into the costs. That would apply to my own house here. My cost is at $22,000, but that doesn't include any kind of labor. This puts tiny houses into a weird pricing predicament because builders are charging for their time, and the prices they're asking are what help them stay in business. They do good work and are charging accordingly, but those prices are too high for what most people think is reasonable. The third issue is that the financing options for tiny homes are not nearly as competitive as the traditional housing market. I saw a building loan advertised recently with an interest rate of 2% per month. It doesn't matter how affordable the monthly payment appears, that adds up to 24% per year. Loans like this are predatory and should be avoided at all costs. The irony is, the allure of the freedom provided by a tiny house draws people into bad financing deals that trap them into bad financial situations. From an investment perspective, I think most people looking for the financial freedom offered by alternative living would be far better off moving to a lower cost of living area and buying either land where they can put a tiny house structure on that's on a foundation, or find a cheaper house in need of renovations that they could buy at a low price point. Both of these options would allow them to force appreciation into their investment by making improvements on those properties. Something to keep in mind is that real estate is one of the key investment vehicles that people use for building wealth. So this would give them access to that opportunity. If being mobile is the main appeal, then living in a used RV would be a far cheaper option in most cases. Are there exceptions to the things I've discussed so far? Of course. I've seen people build tiny homes that they live in for a few years, then turn into rental properties or listings on Airbnb. This can be a great way to recoup those initial costs rather than trying to sell it after it depreciates. Using tiny house rentals as another income stream I think is super smart. If the initial cost is relatively low and you can charge $100 to $200 per night, it could potentially pay for itself relatively quickly. That's actually the plan for this tiny house down the road. Once we outgrow this house, it'll be converted to a rental on our property. As a tiny house owner who has a passion for personal finance, I just wanted to put this information out there. If you want to see more of our projects, hit that subscribe button and follow along on our journey as I set up a tiny house homestead.